Hello everyone, welcome to Book 2, Night 6 of the Orphan Tales Live Quarantine Reading Series. It's an exciting night, so we're getting to a very popular character this evening. I think green might be the linking theme to all my most popular characters. Because we have arrived at Taglio's portion. So things will be more cheerful, though not less horror genre, but a little more cheerful tonight. God, again, I'm roasting and my glasses are fogging up because it's so hot. It was so hot today. It's just miserable, and I am still wearing my winter clothes to achieve some kind of continuity over the course of all of these videos. So I'm sorry if I have to clean my glasses every once in a while. We are listening to S.J. Tucker, as always, and her wonderful song about Taglio. And I'll talk to you more about the creation of that character when it's over. So let me get through my intro stuff and we'll get started. As always, for legal reasons, this is not an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales. This is a play. You can find the wonderful music we're listening to now and many more songs based on this book at sjtucker.com. You can get copies of this book at any of your local independent bookstore web portals. If you would like to patronize mine, it is printbookstore.com, based in Portland, Maine, a wonderful store. You can find me, Cat Valenti, at the following places where I go by Cat Valenti. Twitter at Cat Valenti. You can subscribe to my Patreon at Cat Valenti, which has all kinds of good stuff going up there this month, and subscribe. You can catch up in the archive at Cat Valenti Live on YouTube. And you can, if you are so moved, you can toss a coin to your witch in my Instagram profile, my YouTube profile, or on my website, which is catherinemvalenti.com. There is absolutely no obligation to do so. These are absolutely free from me to you, but everything's on fire and times are very tight for our little family, so it would be deeply appreciated if you would. Thank you so much to Heather, Apollonia, Agatha, Harry, Ryan, and Elizabeth. These are missing a couple from that I didn't get notifications on from a couple of weeks ago. So I had to make a list to remember the names because my email was acting up. But thank you so much for tipping me over the last couple of weeks. You are my heroes. You cannot know how much it means to this household. I am deeply, deeply grateful. And I will thank anyone else who chooses to on Wednesday, because we've moved to doing this on Wednesday and Sunday nights. You can ask me any questions that you would like to ask me after the reading. Do think of them while I'm reading so that we don't have to have any dead time where I look awkwardly into a camera and there's just terrible, terrible silence all around. And I think that that's it. I always forget one, but I think that I remembered it this time. My phone's working again. No problems, so I don't know what happened there. Oh, the lipstick report. So I actually don't own enough lipstick to do a different lipstick every single night, which I kind of regret now. But this is Boskin's Holiday Rose with an overlay of Urban Decay's Regulate lipstick glitter on top of it. I wore it a lot when we were doing this every night, and this is the first time I've worn it for book 2, but I do really like it. So yeah. Roasting, two-tone lipstick. We got Taglio tonight, and this song slaps. Okay, so one thing I do want to say before this gets started is, so I've pointed out a couple of times that this was written almost 20 years ago, and there are things that I would write differently if I were writing it now, and we are at one of them. I was not aware at the time that the word gypsy is considered a slur to the Roma people. I apologize for using it. I would change it if I could. It sucks. I shouldn't have used it. I wish I hadn't. But it's in there. It's in the book. I was a child and I knew no better. So I deeply apologize to anyone who may have taken offense at any point on that. I will try to skip over it in the reading or throw something else in on the fly. there was never any intent to give offense. And that is not what the Orphan Tales has ever been about. So I do apologize, and if they ever talk to me again at Random House, I'm not with them anymore. So if they ever talk to me again and want to do some kind of anniversary edition, I'll get them to take it out. But these things do happen when 20 years go by, and I'm very, very sorry for the use of that word. So, all that being said, let's get started. The tale of the 12 coins continued. I screamed. Oubliette put all her weight on the stamp, and it slogged into my armpit, mashing skin and bone and blood together. It did not sever on the first try, and I whimpered. I groaned like a woman in labor as she loaded up the stamp and brought it down again. I think I may have fainted away, for I remember waking to her tightening a strip of one of the corpse's dresses around my stump. She held the tattered shoulder to the hottest parts of the machine, which glowed a baleful red, and I probably screamed again. It was a wonder we were not caught, but then the children often cried out in their sleep, often screamed, often wept. Perhaps I should have let Oubliette do it after all. She would not have screamed. I remember staring at the ruined arm, which was once part of me, once my own, and would be no more. Those were my fingers, fingers that had gripped pens and bucket handles, cow teats and apple cores. Those were the lines on my palm that foretold who knew what future. It was my body we put through the mint, laboriously, my blood we smelled as it wet the innards of the machine, as we turned the gears and moved the pistons with her 2 hands and my one. It was my body I heard crunched under the final stamps, and my body I saw emerge from the mouth end of the machine's arc, the mouth which had been shaped into a tooth-white grin. 12 coins, pale and round, a clean, gleaming bone. All we had in the world out of my own flesh, like a wet fruit cut out of its skin. During the midday meal, we found Vumim watching one of the girls devour translucent tourmalines as though they were the first cherries of summer. She stroked her neck. She stroked her diamond belly beneath her rags. We smeared our best smiles on our faces and called her to us. She did not seem to notice the arm. So many of us were mangled there, another injury was no foreign thing. We want to leave, Vumim, Oubliette said firmly. I am certain that you do, little one. All is not as it was when Mero was the center of the world, and no man wished to leave it before his pockets were full of lapis and his arms full of women. But you must know I cannot help you. We do not want your help, my friend hissed. We are citizens of Mero now. We've paid our taxes, we do our civic duty, and we have the right to trade just like anyone. Vumim cocked her head, her bluish hair falling into her face like waxen icicles. You have no money to spend, precious ones. No, Deba. What could you possibly buy with air? Oubliette drew out our purse. I was still half faint and ashen. I did not trust myself to handle the coins without dropping the whole lot to the rubbish floor. One by one, she fed the coins into her palm until it was piled high and held it out. 6. Only 6 coins in her shaking hand to buy our lives back. The grain merchant's daughter knew to hold something in reserve in case the ghost drove up the price. Vumim licked her lips with a colorless tongue. That is not enough to buy your ruby breakfast, she said. But she did not look away. She and Oubliette locked their gazes for a long time, kind of silent bartering I could not enter. Finally the foreman spoke, her glassy eyes drooping in her skull. In the days when we ate all possible things, the rarest transactions were the most prized, even if they were no more than a twig traded for a feather. If the seller of the twig were a man with one eye, and the seller of the feather a woman with a beard, it was called a success. No worker has ever made this offer, and I will accept it in the name of the old Assad. But you will leave out of the vault of night, and I will boast of my trade only after you have long gone, lest it be judged less rare than I think, and I am punished. We agreed. She took the coins in her long, spidery fingers, closing them over the bone reverently, with a strangely kittenish moan of pleasure. "It was like this," she murmured, "before, in the time when all possible things were bought and traded, and the silk was high and red over the Assad. The feel of economy was like this, light and thick and sweet. I remember it, I tasted it, long after I could taste nothing else, and the memory of marrow was lost, which was called Traducium in days long dead." She closed her eyes and looked up through the ragged roof, her gray throat ululating in grief and longing. The tale of the crossing continued. A wind had picked up across the water. The surface was dull and flat, gray as a maiden's eye, and moving quickly, wrinkles forming and traveling around the little ferry. I suppose Marrow seemed a fit name, considering their new vocation, better than their old one at any rate. Seven mused. Idle chuckled and shifted under his cloak. He stroked the hunch of his back with one hand, thoughtfully. "Traducium was a place of wonder once, boy. Those roses blowing through your door once covered the whole place with a dome of flowers. There were silver towers and diamond turrets. There were women in purple and men in scarlet. It smelled of algae and gold. Do not speak of what you do not know." "I know enough of that stinking wind-blown hole," Seven said hotly, his breath fogging the icy air. "Because you know a corpse does not mean you knew the man." They lapsed into a woolen silence. Seven pulled up his collar around his face with one awkward hand and scowled into the breezes, whipping his cheeks. He could see the clouds bunch and knot in the northern sky, not dark as rain clouds ought to be, but pale. They were simply gathering a great snarl of white, like cotton wound sloppily round a spindle. "The storm is coming," Idle said quietly. "She's early today. I don't know if we'll make land by the time she blows through." "I've weathered storms before, old man." "No doubt. Brave thing like you. But lake storms are a breed apart." "I am brave," Seven grumbled. "If I were not brave, I would not have come here. I would have drunk steaming cider by a hearth instead of this, built a house, had children. I am going to save her. She saved me. We keep saving each other, even in the mint. What else can I do?" "Nothing, son," said the ancient ferryman, his voice relenting to softness. "No one who crosses this water ever had another choice." He pulled the silt-stuck bottom of the lake, and somewhere far off a bird keened. A gull or a cormorant. Seven thought the trees were closer now, that the silver line of the beach gleamed below them, but he felt sick with the rocking of the ferry, and his eyes were rubbed raw by the wind's fingers. The sky was so blank he could not see the sun, and he thought he smelled a coming snow. Idle's cutting voice sank into his thoughts. "Tell me, how many of those awful things do you have left?" "One," the young man said. "I saved two, one to get me to her and one to get us back. I saved enough for this, for her. That's all I have left." "And that leaves 4 to fill out your tale, before the storm screams in and there is no more room to talk beneath the white winds." Seven nodded and coughed roughly. 4. 4 coins for a cripple and a monster to ply the road. It's all there was outside of Marrow, once Fumim had punched through the fishbone wall at the edge of the city for us. Roads paved and dirt-packed, cobbled and painted and bricked. We followed one. We might have followed any of them, but we followed that one. And now I am crossing a lonely lake to her, my sister and my friend. The tale of the 12 coins continued. We chose a road, and for the first time in 7 years, a golden sun hanging in the sky, not unlike a ball, shone on our skins. It turned us red. We swam in blue rivers and splashed each other. We ate blackberries and walnuts cracked with flat stones. We did not work. And when we swam, I saw her naked flesh shoot by under the cold, clear water. I still saw nothing beautiful, only Deva lurking beneath. We wandered for a long while, she and I. We might have searched out our homes again, or homes which would suit us now, but we had, by mutual agreement, done with cities. We kept to the green orchards like foxes and sucked at sweet owl eggs. Autumn was beginning to swell in the apples before we saw anyone on our road, and I am sure we looked quite feral by then. Oubliette's hair was even growing long and shaggy, crow-black, framing her face like rough hands. We had no mirrors or shears. My hair was longer than hers. We were in quite a state, though happily gorged on apples and rabbit haunches, as we were, between us, quite clever at catching them. After agate and jasper, soft meat and crisp fruit were miracles to us. We sought them out, starving. And so when we heard the cart clattering down the lane, we were still in rags and shoeless, but fatter than we had ever been. The cart had 2 great wheels, which towered over the thing itself, painted blue and spangled with silver stars. A little wagon was suspended between the wheels, with a peaked roof and round windows. Doors opened in each side, and it seemed spacious enough. Maybe it was even pleasant to sit inside and watch the spokes clack by. It was drawn by a lithe man clothed all in green, hose, doublet, fetching little cape and hat, all greener than apple skin. He had hair the color of egg yolks that stuck out from under his cap, and a thin, affable face. His feet, from the knees down, were the spindle-swift legs of a dun-brown gazelle, and his green hose ended just before the fur in a brass buckle, old enough to have gone slightly green itself. Oubliette and I stared, our mouths gaping. "Well, good morning, little ones. How does the glabrous day find you?" he said, curtsying as well as his legs allowed. He did not let go his long blue poles, and his voice was like a thrush's chirping song. He smiled. His teeth were small and bright as a fox's. "Good morning," I said. Oubliette held my hand tightly. "You are fortunate to have crossed paths with us, my little wastrels. I can see you are in need of civilization, and art is the midwife of the civilized soul. We are performers and minstrels, singers of songs and players of scenes, catamites and castrati, the finest and brightest and best dressed of all of these. For a coin we will show you the world on our stage. For 2 we will teach its ways to you. I am Taglio, juggler, dancer, eunuch, acrobat, and scenery wrangler, and superlative nut of the cart." We introduced ourselves shyly, but neither of our hands went to the hidden purse. We could not afford to spend my body on this colorful man, no matter what he promised. He beamed at us with sparkling green eyes. As we looked closer, we saw that the silver stars were simply bits of tin suspended from the wheels. The paint had worn in places, from startlingly dark and vivid cobalt to pale turquoise. The effect was very pretty all the same, and the stars made a tinkling sound in the breeze. And we have a pretty amazing illustration here. Give that a second. There's a lot of detail. "Wouldn't you like to have a little dance?" he trilled, hopping from one hoofed foot to another. "A little scene, the princess and her faithful cat, perhaps. The huldra, the bull, and the tree." Oubliette looked stricken, and Taglio hurried on. "Or something more grown-up, as befits 2 upstanding young things such as yourselves. The murder of King Ismail, the rape of Ambarabad, the siren Seralio. Or perhaps just a song, a card trick, a coin from behind your ear. We are flexible, we are amenable, amicable and amiable, and must be in times such as these. We are too hungry for sparrow pies and blueberry cordials, and barter our talents for such reasonable fees." A large red paw emerged from one of the blue windows. It stretched lazily, extending its scarlet claws and retracting them again. "Who is that, Taglio, my pet?" A low voice came from behind the birdskin curtains. It had a growl to it, but it was not unpleasant, like rubbing fur against the grain. "That will be my mistress and my partner, the other half of my we, my menagerie, my muse, my terror, my darling, said the green man, finally setting his long poles onto the dappled ground and gallantly opening one of the moon-round doors of the spectacular cart. Out of the blue stepped a manticore. I know this now, because she has since carefully shown me all the parts of her body and explained their origins and uses. But then she seemed an outlandish vision, and I could not have named her for 100 bone coins. She was a lion of sorts. Her pelt was red as leaves and oiled to a glossy shine, but her head was that of a woman with enormous blue eyes, the same blue as the cart, her aristocratic face framed with stiff, wiry hair the same shade as her fur. Haloing her head like a mane, it flowed back over her muscled shoulders like a genteel shawl. As she exited the cart completely, her tail came into view. It was that of a great serpent, mottled green like old copper, scaled and scabrous. At its tip was a scorpion's barb, hard and shiny as a beetle's carapace. Grotesque the red, Taglio crowed. Actress, beast, mezzo-soprano. The manticore inclined her head modestly, her ruddy cheeks high and lovely. There was something strange about the line of her jaw. It did not close quite right, like a child's broken music box, but it was wide and generous, and her lips were like a swipe of blood. In her jaw were 3 rows of sharp yellow teeth. Will you not hear her sing? It is worth 5 times anything you might pay to listen, I swear by my absentia. Oubliette crooked a quizzical eyebrow, and the gazelle man grinned. A eunuch is lacking in some things, and flush with others. That which I do not possess are naturally absent from me, and thus in polite company I refer to them as my absentia. We must all be allowed our little eccentricities. If you will sit yourselves down on the grass, a cushion fit for lords and ladies of twice our collected ranks, I will tell you the tale should it please you. The first taste is always free. The manticore rolled her bright eyes. How can they decide if they want the whole show if they do not get a taste of us? He protested. Go on, then, and don't complain to me when it's mice for dinner again, the red beast retorted. Taglio smiled his sharp, glittering smile, tapped the earth with his hooves in a shuffling 2-step, and began. The Tale of the Eunuch and the Odalisque. Sing, oh, sing of the graceful gazelle. Nimble and fleet are their boot-black feet, and sweet are their whistling songs. No shepherd more steadfast than we, no firefly so quick on the wing. No melodies lighter, no lyrics brighter than ours, on the sheep-spotted fields of home. We are the bringers of grace. We are the players of the goat-horned flutes. We are the fire tenders in fields where hay has been bundled and wheeled. But light up your camp and find us gathering near, stamping our hooves on the grassy ground, stamping our hooves to the beat of your drum, stamping our hooves to the sound of your wine-sped violas. But kindle a flame and see us creeping in from our sheep and our cattle, creeping in from our milk and our meat, creeping in from the dew and the damp and the pinwheeling, heart-reeling ergot on the rye, the wheat, the golden, gleaming grain. And if in the morning you find your wife has gone missing, if in the morning you find your brother run off, if in the morning you find your number 1 or 2 less than the night before, it is not our fault. We are but animals. We follow our bestial nature, as you do, else there would be no fires and no wine, no songs to thresh the mind, no whirling, no wheeling, no slaughtered sheep bleating, and what would our lives be then? Yes, we take 1 or 2, but what do we give you? Fire and wine and songs in the mind, and whirling and wheeling and lovely girls bleating. We give as good as we take. Yes, sing for the gazelle. These are my people, and we are well sung. We hunt the campfires out in the low dells, and do we dance? Do we sing sweeter than any twanging country harp? Bet on it. Are we lissome and lithe? Are our faces fair? Do we kiss like poets imagine they do? Bet on that too. And are there one or two gone in the morning? By our green you shall know us, our green coats and our green skirts trailing behind us, so that only those who know to look will see those boot-black hooves a-gleaming. And what befalls those lucky one or two, who in the damp ashen dawn are nowhere to be found? All creatures under the stars must eat, my dears. We are shepherds. To eat the sheep we tend would be an abomination, would it not? To eat cattle and goat would be obscene. How could you even suggest it? What perversion you describe. Be off with you now, else you shall feel my hoof. But wait. Perhaps there was a Geselli with hungers like the ones you expound. Perhaps there was one who did not like the taste of girl, even less the taste of wiry boy. Perhaps he thought lamb and roasted cow smoky and rich and sweet. Perhaps he thought goat salty and soft to his neat white teeth. Perhaps his name was Taglio, and perhaps he stands before you. And it is not impossible to imagine that after years of secret meals and pantomiming at the revels, pretending to gnaw a bone or lap a wound, he was caught gorging himself on a little lamb who had died of the cold. But this poor Geselli begs forgiveness. What it was that caught me at my feast is hard to believe. It was a cow. This does not strain the mind, I am sure, but it was a cow the size of a barn, with eyes like the forked spaces between flames, depthless and black and glittering fair. Her flanks were dun golden, smooth and muscled, showing girl-white, sow-white, wool-white skin beneath. Her hooves were bronze, her udder full and firm as a moon, her nose flared trumpet-wise, the breadth of her chest enormous. Yet she moved, I swear it so, without sound, over the grass, graceful as a trained horse, and her hoofs burned the earth where she stepped, sending up sighs of steam. There was a light about her, I tell you true. It was not a glow, but a light that hung within her, like the shape of a second cow. I fell before her on my knees. "Oh, great heifer of heaven," I cried, for my poetry had not left me. "You have come to punish me for devouring your children, but they were sweet and I am weak." She regarded me calmly. When she spoke, her voice vibrated in my bones. "I eat? Why should you not?" "Because Geselli eat dancers, not the flock. We are to eat drunkards who cannot find their way home through the mere, not a poor defenseless cow who never knew where home was to begin with." "I know where home is." "I dare say you're not defenseless either." "I have not my brother's horns, but it has never been a worry to me. I have not my brother's heart either. I shed my hiding place to taste the salt sweet grass and listen to the lowing of beasts, for these things are as cool water poured over my forelock when I have been cloistered in the stone in the dark for so long. He never cared for grass." "Sing for the Geselli, but also sing to them, for we are beloved of tales, and they are beloved to us." I knew her then, and I scolded myself I had not known her before. Had I not myself told tales of Alkai, the milk star, who makes oxen of bulls with a snap of her jaw? Had I not told the tale of the mad castrati monks to frighten the calves in their creches? I fell to my knees, my own small, furry knees, below her great shining face, beauty beyond any dancing girl with a red shawl and blue stockings. Her light filled me. I could hardly see for the glow of it. Perhaps it is not right to explain how a man is moved. Perhaps he ought to keep the logics of light and blood and heaven locked tight within him, with a chain and a snapping dog before it. Perhaps it is enough to say that a man with graceful feet and a tongue more graceful still was struck dumb by the radiance of a cow, pierced with shame for all he had eaten in her image, cut through with adoration of the smallest shadow cast by the flick of her tail. How can even the most quick-fingered of minstrels convince his catgut heart to tell what ecstasy is? I am the most quick-fingered of minstrels, and I cannot. What did I say to her? I swore things. I babbled like a lost sheep. I would join those who cut themselves in her honor for her love. I would do the penance her brother refused. If she would but touch me, I would die at her lowing. Hard to recall now. Ecstasy slips the mind. But before she could reject me, might she? I could not let her. I drew my sheep shears and did his penance in mine there on the long grass, my blood mixed with the blood of the flock, with her light, her milk light, lying on me like a forgiving hand. The pain was a ripping, a gouging, keener than horseshoe nails pounded into me, and my green trousers were a sudden red. But her light was with me and filled me, and the silver singing in my head was greater than any shear, the silver woolen singing which stopped up all but itself, the silver wild and woolen singing which I shall not forget for all my cart-drawn days. Below her I lay in a sop of blood. She watched me calm as a cloudless sky. She blinked. What a sad, strange thing you are, she sighed, and lumbered away over the low hills, scalding the weeds as she walked. Perhaps I was hasty. Perhaps I was foolish. But I never liked the human girls anyway. Faith is always embarrassing in the morning. The other Geselli recoiled. If I had been a secret deviant before, I was unmasked. I left them with little remorse, let them revel and eat and revel again. It did not interest me. But I found in the wide world, which does not smell entirely of wet sheep's wool, cowhide, and goat hair, that opportunities for a eunuch are limited. I did not wish to be a spy, which is the chief activity of my, if you'll excuse the expression, breed. To be a spy is no better than to be endlessly dancing in the midst of a throng you intend to devour, and I had had enough of that. I had no patience for the intrigues of a chancellor or advisor to any sort of king or treasurer. When it came to it, the chief activity of the monks of Alkai seemed to be to rattle their absentia in little cedar boxes and brag about how long it had taken them to faint from the pain. This did not seem to me the most sacred of pastimes. It seemed logical enough, therefore, to choose what was left to me and travel south through the orange blossom jungles to the lands ruled by those who kept harems. I had been a shepherd of flocks which looked and smelled far worse, after all. And so I became a shepherd to the Raja's women, who were varied and beautiful as a herd of horses, swift and sleek, red and brown and black and golden, their hair dipped in frankincense and braided up in pearls, their skin kept firm with bamboo switches and bound up in yellow silk. For this color marked them as the Raja's, no less than a chair or a shoe. Of course my clothes too were yellow, and I mourned my lost green. But I belonged to the Raja too, down to my name and my boot-black hooves. I was happy. I soothed the new ones when wars brought them trembling to my care. The older ones taught me to play cards and juggle. The ones in between told me tales I had never heard before. There were so many women, in truth, that the Raja could not possibly visit them all, and thus he was not much a part of our lives, a spectre only looming in the distance. And every night there was lamb to eat. Chickens, goat, quail eggs, and deer flanks. No one even suggested that I might eat a girl. Immaculata was not a concubine, or a wife, or even a war prize. She was an odalisque, which made her like me. She was a virgin who served the harem. She did not guard them, but dipped their hair in frankincense and braided it up in the pearls, hardened their skin with bamboo switches, and bound them up in that yellow silk. She painted their breasts with bronze paint when they were called up to the bedchamber, drying their tears and working the most wonderful calligraphy on their skin like the tracks of jeweled spiders. Her own silks were red, red as the blood of my body that night under the star, and she moved among the others like a scarlet ship in a golden sea. I will not say I did not watch her on those tides. I did not cut out my heart on that long grass. One day she came to me, a yellow-bound fool, to me, and drew me aside to a long golden couch, sat me next to her. Her hair was a river of smoke curling away from her stark brown eyes and amber skin. She was all the colors of expensive teas, dark and golden, burnished. There were no pearls in her braids. "Have you seen the new wife?" she asked, her timber low as an iron horn. "No, I did not know we were due." "I've seen her. She is not kept with us. But if you would leave this place as I would, why would I want to leave? I chose to wear yellow and play cards with the old wives. Immaculata looked at me as though I was mad. Her eyes widened, and I could see the oily gold with which she lined her lashes. I thought you were like me, she said quietly. I am. Foolishly, I clutched her hands, and she snatched them away. No, I wish to leave this place more than anything, more than I wished to be a bird when I was a child, or to learn the craft of tea-making when I was grown. The tale of the tea-maker and the shoemaker. I do not remember being made of tea. My mother told me this story, and then my father told it to me, and it was the same story, so I am sure that it is true, or at least that they have agreed upon it. Sophia was a shoemaker, and she lived in her cobbler's shop, which had a copper bell over the door and a knocker in the shape of a soul. She was not a beauty, but among her shoes no woman would shine. She made shoes of blue silk and shoes of black leather, shoes embroidered with scenes of leafy forests and flowers as intricate as fingerprints. She made huntsmen's boots and soldiers' boots and boots fit to withstand a quest. She made dancing slippers, shoes of gold and shoes of silver, shoes of fur and shoes of glass. She made tiny shoes shaped like cups with woolen sides and iron soles for her cloven-hooved customers, and long knitted socks for the serpentine. She made three-toed shoes for the aviary custom and gently shaped iron into horseshoes. She even made, as an experiment, a large and generous single shoe with space to wiggle the toes in case a monopod happened by. On this great shoe she carefully stitched scenes of winemaking in expensive violet thread, dyed with the saliva of a certain snail. Her most famous shoes, which none had yet been able to afford, sat in the window like a relic in a shrine. They were made of raw black silk and green thread, and had soles which were so fine they would not dare to whisper on a floor of pebbles. It was said that they felt like the dreams of Sophia when slipped on the feet. Among her shoes she was plain and hard-working, her hair the color of leather laces, her eyes the shade of well-worn soles. Elpidios was a tea-maker, and he lived in his tea-house, a small place with a green thatch roof and long rows of tea plants before and behind. He was not a beauty, but among his teas no man would shine. He made green teas that tasted of warm hay and sunlight, black teas that tasted of smoke and sugar, red teas that tasted of cinnamon and blood, yellow teas that tasted of frankincense and dandelion root. He made delicate white teas that tasted of jasmine and snow. He made winter tea from the last dried leaves and twigs of the harvest, and this tasted of bread and of grief. He made teas from cherry blossoms and chrysanthemum petals, rose and lotus, orange peel and magnolia. Some of these tasted light and sweet, like clouds drifting from the sun. Others tasted spicy and dark, like thick cakes. His most famous tea, which none had yet been able to afford, was brewed from white tea leaves, violets, and a single red leaf. This was the tea that tasted of the dreams of Elpidios, and he prized it dear. Among his teas he was plain and hard-working, and his hair was the color of oolong, and his eyes were the color of wet leaves. One day it happened that the tea-maker found himself in want of shoes, and the shoemaker found herself in want of tea, and these two met. She fitted shoes to his feet. He fitted tea to her throat. For her he made his dream tea, and held his breath while she drank. For him she took down from the window the slippers of black silk and green thread, which would make no sound on the floor of his tea-house. She sipped the deep red tea and exclaimed, "Why, you have been dreaming of me." He slid into her shoes and exclaimed, "Why, you have been dreaming of me." And so it was. Now the years went by, and though Sophia stitched her shoes and Elpidios steeped his tea, they had no child of their own. Sophia was not greatly troubled, as she had plenty of baby shoes to make without adding any of her own. But Elpidios longed for a daughter, and his teas began to taste bitter and brackish, for he no longer made the dream tea at all. Finally he went to his wife and said, "The ways of this world are marvelous and strange. Let us take my finest teas and fashion them into the shape of a child. We will place her in one of your shoes for her cradle and let her lie under the light of the stars, and who knows then what may happen." Husband, this is not the way of making a child. Let us try. And if it remains a pile of brown leaves with no life in them, I shall forget that I ever dreamed of a child, and begin to brew my tea of white leaves and violets and the single red leaf once more. Sophia was mild and even-tempered, and she knew that madness must play itself tired if it is to pass. She made a sweet green shoe with crimson tea berries on a snowy hill with a snowy hill embroidered on its side. It had a little heel of cherry wood. On the tongue she sewed with infinite care a living chrysanthemum with 16 petals. But when it came time for Elpidios to reveal his tea doll, he refused. "There is one leaf missing," he said, and departed for the highest hills with a sack on his shoulder. He was gone through the fall and into winter, and Sophia began to worry for him. Perhaps she should have made sturdier shoes for him, she thought. She drank a pale tea of dried birch bark and strawberry leaves he had left behind, and stroked the sweet green shoe. But at length Elpidios did return, smiling his old smile. In his hands he held a slender leaf, the color of the moon shining on an open well. He told his wondering wife that he had heard of a place where a tea bush grew that had been touched by a star in the first days of the world, and he was certain now their child would wake. So together they placed his shimmering leaf in the center of the tea doll and placed the doll in the shoe. In the long rows of tea, they laid the sweet green shoe and waited. For many days nothing happened. Sophia assured her husband, for by now she had begun to hope, that all children take time to grow. Elpidios paced in his tea house. Finally they heard a crying in the tea rose like a kettle boiling. The tea maker and the shoemaker ran out into the long leafy paths and found their little girl wailing in a sweet green shoe. But I do not remember being made of tea. I suppose no one remembers what the world looked like from inside their mother. We lived happily and well, and I drank the dream tea every day and found how often my father had dreamt of me. I grew to wear the sweet green shoes on my own brown feet and found how often my mother had dreamt of me too, when my father was in the highest hills. I learned to make green teas and black teas and red teas and yellow teas and white teas like melted ice. I learned to stitch forests and flowers and fashion shoes of gold and silver and leather and glass. In time, my parents died, as parents will do, and though I was younger than I would have liked when this occurred, I dried my tears. I made both the famous tea and the famous shoes, and I believed myself complete. But as they were not beauties, I am not. Even when the procurer came with a sword at his hip and velvet in his coat and a warm helmet on his head, I was not beautiful enough to be stolen for the Rajah's bed, only for his prison of silk and bronze. None of the girls in our village were spared service of some kind or another, and I was made a slave to slaves, a maid to wives and concubines. I paint on their breasts as once I drew patterns on the silk for stitching. They are unhappy, and I do not know how to soothe them, for I am unhappy too. But I make for them the dream tea of my father, a tea of white leaves and violets and a single red leaf, and hope they taste my dream of a life outside. I served this tea not long ago to the newest wife with her 5th child already at the breast. She sprouts children like berries, this one. She is very beautiful in her white veils, and her black eyes are so deep they seem to have no pupils at all. Her hair falls past her waist in long black curls, and it shines most curiously in the candlelight, like the skin of a salamander. She fixed those depthless eyes on me as she sipped my father's tea, holding her golden cup in both hands. "I am sorry for you," she said, and her voice moved against me like a stone-crushing millet. "But if you would not waste to less than an old brown leaf in this place, come to my bedchamber on the 3rd day of the new moon." She set down her cup and put her hands to my face, the light in them terrible and wonderful, like a judgment, like a promise. I was weeping before I knew it, the nearness of her bright and awful and endless. "I swore to him not to incite the harem," she murmured, "but an odalisque is not a wife, and I can see the leaf your father placed in you glowing still. Because of it, we are sisters, and I cannot abide a sister's suffering. Tell the eunuch that keeps you that Zemea commands you to attend her." She kissed my cheek, as gentle as a thrush singing. And we will pick up there next week. So we've got lots of connections to the previous tales in this one. Shadukium and Zemea and all the old bands back together. So Taglio is based on a Gaelic, an Irish Gaelic beastie called the Beavan She. The problem is that you spell that she Sith, and you can't name anything Sith anymore. So I had to come up with my own sort of beastie to do what I wanted there. So I get the Gaselli, who are mine and mine alone, but definitely have a real world mythological inspiration. And his meat-eating habits make him sort of a vegetarian among his own people. But I do love my Taglio very much. He's a lot of fun to write. And it brings up a lot of... I actually studied eunuchs quite seriously at university, Byzantine eunuchs specifically. And so all of that is kind of real eunuch action, the ecstatic eunuchs who cut off their own parts in revelation and revel for their god is a very, very real phenomenon. Church is a little different these days, but it used to be a lot more or a lot less fun depending on your point of view. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask? We usually have 0 questions. Well, I'll do my outro business. If you have questions, you can throw them up while I'm talking. But we'll get this out of the way. Instagram does cut these off at an hour, so we've only got about a little less than 15 minutes. So for legal reasons, this has not been an audiobook of The Orphan's Tales by some chick named Catherine Valenti. This has been a play, a one-woman show. You can find copies of this book at any of your local independent booksellers' web portals. If you would like to patronize mine, it is printbookstore.com, based in Portland, Maine. You can find music based on these books at sjtucker.com. You can find me on Twitter at Cat Valenti. You can subscribe to my Patreon at Cat Valenti as well. You can catch up in the archive on YouTube at Cat Valenti Live. They usually go up within 24 hours, although nowadays you can just look on Instagram. They've changed the way they store videos, and it's all very easy to access. And if you are so moved, you can toss a coin to your witch. There's a tip jar on my Instagram profile, my YouTube profile, and on my website at catherinemvalenti.com. These are free readings to help keep us all sane during this completely horrific time in history when we might all like to chew off various parts of ourselves to escape. But times are very tight for us, so if you are moved to put something in the witch's hat, I cannot express how deeply it would be appreciated, and I will thank you by name on the next stream. What are better alternatives to the G word these days? Just traveler. I'm probably not the right person to ask, as I am not Romani. So I understand that traveler is okay, but it's kind of a slur in parts of Europe, so I would be a little careful with that. I would talk to a person whose culture this is about what they prefer, but Romani is the proper name, and there are many groups within that. So I think probably by the names of those groups. Do I have a favorite tea? So I don't drink tea. I used to go back and forth between tea and coffee a lot, and I don't drink a lot of tea at all these days. I like a good black tea. I like a good Earl Grey, but I just don't drink very much of it in any way. And when I was nursing my son, I had to drink so much awful milk production tea that I've been off of it ever since. But I'm sure we'll drink tea again. There are many wonderful kinds of tea. Oh, I'm okay. That's not entirely true. I love persimmon tea, Japanese persimmon tea. It's amazing. So I will throw that out as my answer. But I have never found a place to get it in America, so it's a super hipster answer that makes me look like an asshole. I'm thinking in fantasy when you're not referencing an ethnicity. The problem is that it is referencing an ethnicity. It would be like, in fantasy referencing any other ethnicity. It is an ethnicity, and it's one that has suffered a great deal and a great deal of prejudice. So it does reference an ethnicity and a culture. So you just going to have to find another word, and you know, I've had to as well to summon up sort of the positive aspects of that culture, you know, the music and the dance and the incredible things that they produce. Like it's a fascinating and beautiful culture that gets absolutely persecuted on a level I think few Americans really understand how persecuted the Romani are in Europe. So there is no way to take an ethnic word and put it in a fantasy milieu, which does not have the ethnicity, and it's a mistake I made in this book. I wish I had not made it, and won't be making again. That's all I can really say as someone who is not part of that culture, and so definitely doesn't have the right to use that word. Brian says, I just finished Six Gun Snow White today and was blown away. Could there be a sequel? I mean, I've never had any plans for a sequel, as it's a retelling of Snow White, and Snow White, there's no Snow White 2, Snow Harder. So I don't think so. But it is part of a series of novellas that I'm doing with Saga Press. There's just been a gap because I had a child. And Space Opera was actually supposed to be one of those novellas, and it got away from me. But The Refrigerator Monologues was the next one in the series, and there is a Little Mermaid retelling and a Red Riding Hood retelling that will come out of that. So it is a series, they're just all standalone. I hope you enjoy it. To Dreamer, who says they just picked that up. I'm very proud of Six Gun Snow White. I do love that book. I had a lot to say, and I said it. Thank you all so much for watching tonight. It was really fun to read Taglio again. I usually let SJ read that part. She's so good at it. So it's strange for me to read it now. But one of these days we'll get to read it all together again. Actually, I think one of these days soon, I think we're doing a virtual con together. I'll let you know. Yes, Little Mermaid and Red Riding Hood. Little Mermaid is a noir mermaid set in 1940s Seattle called The Sharp Grey Sleep. Red Riding Hood is a post-apocalyptic Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas style road trip one called Wolf Girl versus the End of the World. So yeah, that's coming. That will be coming soon. All right, have a great night, guys. I love you all. I'll see you on Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Same fairy tale time, same fairy tale channel. Good night, everyone.